All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at the NZXT H6 Flow RGB. It's actually smaller than I thought it would be. Not the first time I've heard that in my life, but I digress. For those of you that are in, well, so this says compact dual chamber mid-tower airflow case with RGB fans, or Boiter Tour Mayen Compact L double chamber avec circulation d'air et ventilators, RVB. Why does it say RVB?
Red, verde, blue. I don't know.
Wait,
verde is Spanish. Wait, oops.
Ermöglicht einen ungestörten Blick ins Innere.
What was that?
It says improves cooling performance and creates an uncrowded aesthetic. Jesus, Phil. All right, here we go. Unboxing the H6 Flow RGB. I got a new method today for something I want to try out for testing airflow in cases with a visual representation for you guys to get an idea of what case flow is like. So it's kind of funny. The last couple of years, we've had this sort of a renaissance of case design, or more or less everyone just sort of following suit with Lian Li's Dynamic 011 or 011 Dynamic. But this is kind of like, look, I mean, NZXT is our sponsor, but when something's derivative, you gotta kind of call it out. This looks like an 011 Dynamic had a baby with a Height Y60. So I'm just throwing that out there. But it's smaller than both those cases. It's definitely this is gonna suck. Ah! I knew it was gonna suck because standing here, all the hair in my arms was like, but this is a little different than the Height Y60, whereas where it's got that angled piece in the front, and I'll show you that in a sec, they have decided to put fans there. So it's different. So if you remember, the other case that we're referring to, the Height Y60, had the angle where the glass was, and you had like a three wall glass design, if you will. So this puts three 120 millimeter fans right here, bringing in from the side, angle. So you still get the glass front, intakes on the front. You can have intakes on the bottom and still exhaust on the top and intake on the back, etc. So let me kind of sit down here. We'll take a tour of the inside of the case. It's a mid-tower. It's gonna have some limitations on things that will fit in it. So we kind of wanna go over that. All right, so let's talk about some of the dimensions here. Like I said, because it's a mid-tower case, there's some limitations you gotta be aware of. So starting with the case dimensions itself, 435 millimeters high, with the feet included, 287 millimeters wide, 415 millimeters deep, and it weighs 9.4 kilograms. So CPU cooler height, you could fit up to 163 millimeter high coolers, and GPUs that are 365 millimeters long. So fortunately, it will fit like RTX 4090s and whatnot in here, which is kind of a nice thing about the angled piece on the front being kind of out of the way, is it gives you this full length without any sort of fans interfering on the front. And with the way that those are angled, they'll be blowing right towards your GPU, providing fresh air, as well as two 140 millimeter fans that can be mounted on the bottom in what they're calling their flush mount floor system here, blowing fresh air from the bottom of the case right up to the GPU. So this GPU needs to be mounted in a horizontal position. This does not have a vertical mount attached to it. So with it in the vertical position and the fans facing down, intaking from the bottom of the case, two 140s on the bottom blowing up, fresh air directly under GPU should provide adequate cooling to keep even the biggest, highest demand power GPUs cool. So PSU length is 200 millimeters for compatibility, and then the top radiator says it will fit up to a 30 millimeter radiator. There is an offset channel here so that because it's pretty compact in terms of height, you don't want it interfering with like your VRM coolers and heat sinks that are built onto your motherboard. So you can push the radiator closer to the glass to get it away from the motherboard, and then if you have a 30 mil rad and then 25 mil fans, they'll kind of hang down right in front of it. But that way you can fit AIOs and such on there. In terms of what you can fit on the top, it looks like you can fit a 360 up there, potentially all the way up to a 420, although 420 limitation is gonna be, again, how tall are the components on your motherboard itself. If you're running like a high VRM cooler, like a Z790, Z690, or some high-end motherboard that has tall heat sinks on there because of the power demands that Intel demands, it might interfere. So when it comes to compatibility, that's something you're gonna need to keep in mind. So for front panel connectivity, obviously we have our on-off button. We have our USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A, we have two of those, and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C for the front, as well as a headphone or headset audio jack. And then in terms of drive bays, we have a two 2.5 inch drive bays and one 3.5 inch drive bay on there. So for the three fans that are included on here, there's no bottom fans and no top fans, you have to add those. But for the three fans that are included here, these are the F120 RGB Core case fans. They're 1300 RPM fans with a plus or minus 10% on the RPM. They're 55.17 CFM and 1.27 millimeters of H2O at 26.1 decibels. And then it does have a 2-year warranty on the case itself for, I guess, the fans, and I don't know what else could go bad on a case. You know, I guess if your glass were to just spontaneously explode, which tempered glass can, it's constantly under tension. I guess that could be a thing. So if you take a look at the back panel here, the entire thing is just massive ventilation. You've got, even the IO covers on the back here are just perforated with, like, I don't know how big these holes are. Those look like 4 or 5 millimeters at least for each one of these holes. You can mount a 120 right here. I personally wouldn't mount a 120 right here. I honestly would just put 2 140s in the bottom and leave the 3 120s in the front. And then I would do exhaust on the top. That way you're at least promoting a direction of airflow. Putting another intake right here would just leave, personally I think it would be overkill in terms of positivity. And then we wouldn't necessarily want an exhaust right here, personally, if we have an intake on the bottom and those 3 intakes on the front, on the side like that. I would want as much air being directed towards the top radiator or top exhaust fans as possible. So I would kind of leave this area right here open. More of my builds lately have not been including a rear fan, just for that very reason. So if we take a look at motherboard support, you can see right here, this supports up to pretty much a standard ATX. You can go in eATX, it would hang over the side right here. And because we have this motherboard wall that is elevated with grommets that the cables are designed to make like a 180 turn back into these grommets, if you have an eATX hanging over the side, then you're gonna have even more of a sharp bend to kind of make that back. So standard ATX boards would be recommended in here. Obviously you have a nice open cutout for behind the motherboard, which technically is not even gonna be that useful for when it comes to trying to mount your coolers and stuff, because that's actually right where the PSU goes. So even though you have this big opening, you can mount your motherboard, put your cooler and stuff in, but then once you put your power supply in, you won't have access to that again. So build order is gonna matter. You'll want your cooler standoffs and backplates and all that stuff pre-installed prior to the power supply. But again, because of the size of the case, that's just one of those things that, the nuances that you kind of figure out as you're going. You can see here the back part also has a lot of perforation. Reason for this is intake for the power supply fan. You could technically put the fan facing the motherboard. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, to be honest. I mean, there'd probably be enough standoff between the motherboard and a lot of cool air in that chamber. I almost wonder if I should try that one day in a case just like this to see if that fan can pull heat from the backside of the motherboard and exhaust it. And especially with a high quality power supply fan, the hot air that it could potentially be getting off a motherboard would not be enough to affect the efficiency or the effectiveness of the power supply itself. But if you put it standard with the fan facing out, then it will pull air through this perforation right here, which is quite fine versus what we're seeing on the back of the case itself. So the porosity on this, I'm not sure. It looks like it could be about 50%. Light breath, I can feel through that, but we'll be doing some actual visual representations of airflow a little bit later in this review. Here is our drive cage right here. This looks like this is for our, what they said was a single 3.5 inch drive. So it's got this one captive screw right here, then the whole drive just slides up and out. If you're not gonna be putting, yeah, it's only a single drive, and you can tell that because of the 3 holes right here. There's only 1 row of them. So 1 drive is meant to go in there. This is your box of extra screws and zip ties and Velcro straps and stuff, extra standoffs. The little tool kit or extra hardware that you tend to get with every case is in here. I personally would just leave it off. This is a nice area right here to kind of keep cable management and things that you're not using out of the way. Speaking of cables, the cables that come with it obviously are gonna be for the USBs that we've already mentioned for the front, the headphone jack, as well as our USB 3. So there it is right there. HD audio, USB 3, our USB-C, and then a single front panel connector. I love that so many brands are starting to do this now. It takes the guesswork out of trying to get each one of those dual pins together, and then the LED ones are always separated for whatever reason because they have not been separated on the motherboard in a long, long time. This is not technically a standard, but it's kind of become an adopted standard across all motherboard manufacturers now, to where the layout is always the same for the front panel connector. So it's nice to see this just single header, making it really friendly for first-time builders. Because most of the time when a PC doesn't turn on when you push the button for a new builder, they probably had the power button in the wrong spot or one pin off. That then nothing happens when you push the power button and you think something's wrong. So here are all the pre-installed fan cables right here. We've got we got Velcro straps that are holding everything down. Obviously each fan has a RGB header, which is kind of like a proprietary. So if you're wondering, it's not a standard 3-pin header. You can see right here, it's kind of like NZXT's 4-pin JST looking header, but it's not JST. So they have this adapter connected right there. And let's see what that adapts to. It looks like that does adapt to a standard motherboard header. So that's nice to see. So you're not being kind of shoehorned into using any of their controllers. But if you were using an NZXT RGB controller, then you could take those adapters off and plug that in directly there. Dang it, I should have left it. It just like accordioned out on me. I just want to, okay. It said 3-pin, but it's clearly a 4. So it is PWM. I want to point that out. So I don't know why on the material it said it was a 3-pin fan, because it's clearly a 4-pin. They had to have been referring to the RGB, which technically is a 4-pin, being adapted to a 3-pin as I already showed you. So I feel like that's slightly inaccurate, but it is a PWM, which makes way more sense now. And then these are already adapted to splitters. So all 3 of these fans are going to be operating off of a single header, which this is kind of short, by the way. I just want to point this out. It would reach like right to through the grommet to the motherboard. Most motherboards now have a PWM fan header somewhere on the edge of the motherboard, or either the bottom or the top, so this should be fine. But I feel like this should have been a little bit longer of a pigtail just for, well, safety reasons and having plenty of length, because you don't know where they're going to be on the motherboard. Anyway, that's nice to see. We have 1 RGB pigtail, 1 fan pigtail, because of, I feel like a slinky. We're gonna cut while I try and zip tie this all back up into existence. NZXT's Build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Don't want to spec it yourself? Then choose from BLD's pre-configured player PC systems designed to fit your needs and budget. To see the full lineup and specs of the NZXT BLD Player Series pre-built PCs, follow the sponsored link in the description below. Now that I have painstakingly put all these wires back into their place, leaving the pigtails out, I'm gonna load this up with fans. So I'm gonna leave the 120s that came with it, and then I'm gonna put 2 140s on the bottom and 3 120s on the top without a rear case fan. And then we're gonna test airflow using something new that I bought that hopefully will be useful so that we can use it in future videos. All right, so here's the setup. Okay, so I've got 3 Be Quiet fans on the top. These are 120s, adjustable speed fans. That way I can sort of play around with the airflow based on fan speed. So, wow, that suddenly got very noisy, but holy cow, is that a lot of airflow. Okay, let me see if I can give you some sort of, we're gonna be using smoke, actually. That's what this is right here. We have a smoke machine that we're gonna be blowing air at the chassis, but I just wanna give you some sort of a, if that gives you any idea as to, be free. Yeah.
How to inflate a bag.
Now, these 3 120s right here, they're only 1300 RPM, but they're still pulling in a ton of air. And what we can feel as it comes right here, if we take the glass panel and we sort of just like kind of loosely put it in its place, we can feel the air just like sliding out of the case real bad. So what'll happen is it hits the glass and then it bounces back to the GPU. So it actually creates a lot of natural airflow into the direction that you want it, while still giving you the unobstructed view in the front. So this is kind of a neat way of utilizing this angled cut, giving you a 5th side of the case to utilize something. So it's kind of nice. And then I have no doubt in the future someone will probably come out with distro plate replacements, because the front glass is screwed in. They're Phillips head screws right here, 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 and here. So I have no doubt this front glass can be screwed out, come out, and people are probably gonna come up with distro plates and stuff for the front of this, which would be kind of nice. So now that I'm putting everything back on here, do the amount of airflow we can still feel. Okay, I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna do the bag trick again. Then we'll move on to smoke. I mean, mesh is the killer of airflow, right? If it's too fine. So we're gonna be using the power of smoke for this. We're gonna be testing intake on a couple of different areas. One, just sort of in front of the case to see if the bottom pulls it through. We know the side's gonna pull it through, but we're also looking to see how much of it's being exhausted versus going out of the vents. If we have exhaust and air going out the vents, means we have positive pressure, which will be good for plenty of airflow, and it also will be good for dust reasons. If we have smoke being pulled in any of the vents, then that means we have negative airflow, which would mean that we have a dust accumulation problem of non-filtered intake happening. So let me turn on the heater. Let's get the smoke to start. Okay, so first things first on the bottom right here. All right, so you can see we definitely have intake making it in through the bottom, quite a bit of it actually. And you can see it going out the top of the case as well as positive pressure out the back of the case. And that's just the bottom right there. So if we go ahead and accumulate smoke in front of the case right now, we can get a good representation of, we can see it being pulled in the bottom, and we can see it getting pulled in through the 120s on the side. Look at that. So we definitely have airflow where we want it.
I would suggest to toggle the heater. Because it still keeps going for like a bit afterwards.
Now, one of the things I want to check here is the back. Like, look at this, right? Here's, there's your representation of how much airflow is coming out the top right there. Now, are we going to see any intake in the back? Nope, we're seeing it all get pushed out. So with all of the intake, obviously, 3 120s and 2 140s in the bottom, we're seeing a pretty significant amount of positive pressure. Now, one thing I want to test as we let the smoke sort of clear and our lungs to cooperate, like recuperate here, is I want to see what happens if I go ahead and disconnect the bottom fans. All right, so now that the bottom fans are off, we're going to be looking at just how it does with just the 120s on the side. To be honest, I would not run this case without the bottom 140s. It's too good of a design not to use it, even if they were just slow spinning. But let's create some smoke. This time try not to smoke out the room too bad now that we've let it clear. And I'm just gonna let this accumulate right in front of the case right here. You can definitely see it making its way towards the case. You can see it going in. You can see how violent it pushes the air right towards the front of the case, which is kind of nice. So look at this. It definitely is pulling in. On the bottom though, as you can see, oh wow, it is still pulling air through the bottom. The top fans are. So you can see there's still smoke coming up. So the top fans are definitely causing potentially a negative pressure. That could just be that these are higher flowing fans, right? So let's test that real quick. Let's see what happens now. Oh, I think we have pretty neutral pressure. As you can see, none of it's getting pushed away or really sucked in right there. But on the back of the case, as you can see, or technically the front, definitely pulls in, and it pulls in through the bottom. Some of it makes its way out, but as you can see, the top 360s is still pulling some of the smoke in. Now let me go ahead and artificially show you what the negative pressure looks like if I go full speed on the top fans. So what you'll notice now, and I know it's getting a little smoky here, but you'll still be able to see it. Do you see how it's now getting pulled in the back of the case right here? There's your example of negative pressure. So you got negative pressure pulling all of the air in through the open vents, and with that air being pulled in is going to be dust. Same thing on the back right here even. This smoke that you're seeing is coming in through that back vent. So that's just a perfect example right there of negative pressure. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off and stop trying to asphyxiate ourselves. We do have a lot of ventilation going right now. Cross flow, doors open. All right, so the top fans are on slow. The bottom fans are on high speed right now because these are adjustable speed fans. Now we're looking for what happens if we just have monstrous airflow on the bottom of the case. Should just be a lot more positive pressure. Dude, if we just put the smoke right here, Look at that. It's pulling it all back to the case. It's like overcoming our ventilation currently. This is crazy, huh? Nice representation of what the airflow looks like. Now for the positive pressure test, it should be pretty obvious. It's very positive pressure. Okay, that's enough smoke for today. All right, so the H6 Flow RGB from NZXT. It's a $134 case with the RGB model. I think it's $109 for the non-RGB. I feel like the non-RGB would kind of be the way to go, to be honest. I think it's a lot of case, obviously a lot of airflow, as you can see. NZXT has definitely taken the word flow and run with it with their latest few generations of cases. The 140s on the bottom definitely are beneficial, as we saw. And you can fit a lot of hardware in here. Full-size graphics cards, like a small case like this, being able to fit something as large as a 4090, it's a positive thing. I mean, it's not the biggest case, so that means it's not gonna take up a huge amount of space on your desk, and it's pretty middle of the road when it comes to pricing. So it gives you a lot of features. I think the overall cooling capability of this case is probably going to be very, very good. In fact, I will be doing a build in this case in December where you can really test the components in there. But I think given the airflow that you guys saw through this thing, even though smoke is nothing more than an indication of direction of airflow, but not the volume of airflow, I think you guys can see that the fact that the airflow design in this is doing something. I like the fact that they utilize that angle as a 120 fan mount that doesn't utilize just the front of the case for fans. And it bounces off the glass, which is kind of nice because with all three of them being stacked, it means we're getting airflow to the CPU cooler. If you have an air cooler here, we've got air bouncing off the case and making it to both sides of the GPU, which is going to be helpful. And then, as you saw with all this perforation on the back, if you get the airflow just right, you get a really nice neutral pressure where air is not being sucked in, but also not being blown out. You would, personally, in my opinion, positive pressure is a good thing. Because that means you have more case entering the chassis than is needed, so it just exhausts what it doesn't need that's being directed through coolers and AIOs and whatnot out the ventilation. So that's like the best scenario, and you're not getting dust being pulled in through any of those vents, as I showed you when we put the top fans really, really fast and the bottom fans really, really slow, or even turn those off entirely. Then you saw we were pulling in dust and everything through every crack and crevice. But there's a lot of features built into this. There's a lot of design sense. I think it gives you a pretty good balance of features to price. So obviously it's available in white, it's available in black, it's available in the RGB and the non-RGB version. I honestly think they should offer a version 2 that doesn't have any 120 fans in there. That way you can put your own fans. Although having 3 120s included with a case that would cost about $110 for the non-RGB version, although they're slower fans, they're 1200 RPM versus 1300 RPM, is still a value. Most cases you have to outfit with fans anyway. The bottom 140s in here look great though, especially these Be Quiet fans look like they were just meant to go down here with the nice square frame. Anyway, if you guys want to see a build in this, make sure you like this video, comment down below. But I am going to do a build in December though, and I'm going to probably go with some more, let's just say, I don't want to go super high end on the parts. I want to go something more mainstream, affordable, representative of what a builder might build today with a fairly constrained budget. And I think that this is a good case to start with for a case that can grow with the builder and can keep the highest demanding components cool while also not looking like a black rectangle that came off of Alibaba sitting on your desk. So, all right guys, thanks for watching. Link down below, you guys can check out the H6 from NZXT. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.